So listen to this. Imagine getting into the academy of the team of your city. You and your teammates grow up and become like brothers. Then, only a few years later, you've all made it. You've taken over the first team and you started a golden era. Not only are you cruising at the top of the league, you're on your way to a Champions League title. The entire world is in awe. But then, out of nowhere, in a mid-season friendly with no one watching, you get hit in the face by a football and the next second, you fall to the ground, your head hurts, you're nauseated, your vision is all blurry, and you feel so much pressure in your eye, it's like it's gonna explode. You rush to the hospital and they tell you need emergency surgery, or you will go blind. It all sounds unbelievably dramatic, but that's what happened to Edgar Davids. It was so bad there was even an urban legend that if he played without his iconic glasses, his eyes would explode. As he once said, "I can't remember playing a single game without pain, but no matter what, if the manager wants you to play, the answer is yes sir, I will play." And he meant that. There was a reason they called him the Pitbull. Even though he was shorter than Messi, he was one of the toughest players you could ever face. With infinite stamina, no matter what happened, he would keep running after you, biting at your ankles, and he lived his life exactly how he played. Need to risk it all again in a second surgery? No problem. Gotta wear glasses that fog up the moment I start sweating. Fine, get FIFA to change the rules and I'm back on the pitch. Broke my leg twice, will bounce back. Banned from the national team in the midst of the biggest racism scandal in the history of the country. No biggie. Sabotaged by the medical staff and banned for doping. Not even stressing. He even lost 3 Champions League finals, 2 of them on penalties and 1 of them allegedly robbed, and nothing stopped him because really, he was used to having the odds stacked against him. Way before the glasses and the dreadlocks, Davids had shown up for trial at Ajax 3 years in a row before they finally took him. But once there, his rise was incredible. Still in the academy, the first team's second coach took a special interest on him, and thankfully for Davids, that man was Louis van Gaal. So the moment he took over the team for good, he made him one of his projects. Suddenly, even if he was just a kid warming the bench for the star players, he was collecting a UEFA Cup medal only a few months after his debut, and only a handful of matches later, he had already started his takeover. While the pundits complained that the team was completely dependent on Bergkamp, this 19-year-old winger kept popping up in every big game, and while Bergkamp struggled to keep the team afloat in the league, Davids completely took over the Dutch Cup, putting 3 goals past Feyenoord in the semis and then opening the scoring in the final to secure Ajax's only trophy of the year. So, of course, 6 matches later, he blew out his knee, missing most of the next season, which leads us back to the start of the video. By 1994, with Davids back to full fitness, Ajax was living the ultimate football utopia. 70% of their starting 11 were homegrown players, 20% were kids they picked and chose from the other Dutch teams, and the other 10% was Jari Litmanen, who you can definitely open an exception for. Regardless, then it happened. As the club was about to set foot in the Champions League semi-finals for the first time in 15 years, Davids was being rushed to surgery, and even once it was all confirmed to be a success, he was told that if the team were to make it past Bayern, it would be highly unlikely that he'd be back in time for the final. But do I need to say it again? Davids had no problem with defying the odds. 4 weeks later, he was coming in late for the second leg against Bayern Munich. The next match, he was already scoring, and once the final came, he was in the starting lineup. With 5 minutes left on the clock, Davids, Rijkaard and Kluivert, 3 Surinamese immigrants, combined to score the goal that made Ajax the new kings of Europe. And so, in the celebrations, innocently, Bogaert yelled out, "This is for you, Suriname." And what should have been a simple demonstration of love for their roots became some of the most infamous words in the history of Dutch football. Words that nearly killed the career of Edgar Davids. You see, the next year, with Rijkaard and Seedorf leaving, Davids played what can only be described as a legacy-defining season. If before he was already the backbone of the team, now he was also the brains, lungs and heart, and you could barely notice anyone's absence. They took the Intercontinental Cup, the European Super Cup and a 3rd league title in a row, but in the Champions League, Davids took a punch straight to the stomach, missing the penalty that lost them the final. Little did he know that years later, in the midst of the Calciopoli scandal, it would surface that the blood analysis of many of the Juve players were off the charts, that they were allegedly doping. But you're probably asking, what does it have to do with what Bogart said? Well, my point was that aside from literal superhumans, no one could face off against Davids that year. He was quite simply unplayable, and yet, Hiddink only started him in 1 out of the 10 qualifiers played by the Netherlands that year, something that could be said about a lot of the Surinamese players. Or at least it could, until the playoffs became the country's final chance at qualification, leading Hiddink to bring Davids, Seedorf, Kluivert and Reisiger into the starting lineup, hoping they could save him, with Kluivert scoring the 2 decisive goals and the 4 of them joining forces in a post-match interview where Reisiger declared, "We are the Cabal," igniting rumors that there was a feud between the white and the black players in the squad, which were then sent into overdrive right in the middle of the Euros, with Hiddink blaming their opening match draw on Davids and Seedorf, claiming they needed to play less with their hearts and more with their brains, prompting Seedorf to bite back, telling the press that anyone who knows football knows we are not dumb players, implying there was another reason why Hiddink saw them as such, precisely as a photo came out showing the Surinamese players eating at a separate table from the rest of the squad. And as much as all the players tried to calm down the rumors, the next match, Seedorf was brought off after only 26 minutes, leading Davids, who had been benched from the start, to tell the press that if Hiddink wasn't so deep inside the white players' butts, he'd be able to see who really are his best players. The next day, right in the middle of the tournament, a squad meeting was set up and Davids was banned from the national team, but not before he brought to light that back at club level, since after all 90% of the national team came from Ajax, all of the Surinamese players were paid far less than the rest. For example, Davids got 100k, Seedorf and Kluivert about 80, while Blind and the Boer brothers made $500,000. As you may imagine, after all of that, there was no chance he could stay at Ajax either. Davids had burned every bridge. Thankfully, having 15 titles at 24 years of age was enough to open a door for him at AC Milan, but they were already struggling when he arrived, so by November, Tavares got the sack, Saki came in and benched Davids. And if that wasn't bad enough, then he broke his leg. By the time he recovered, AC Milan did not want to have anything to do with him. They pretty much just took the first offer they got, and that was a £3 million bid by Juventus. That's less than half of what Wimbledon paid West Ham for John Hart. It cannot be overstated how much of a mistake this was. The moment Davids and Zidane met, it was like love at first sight. As Lippi used to say, Davids was a one-man engine room. He was more than capable of carrying the whole team on his back, meaning suddenly Zidane could just focus on being Zidane, and so Juventus dominated. By the end of the season, not only were they back on top of the league, but Davids would be playing his 3rd Champions League final in 4 years, though again, he'd come out defeated, and I'm betting it hurt way more given that Seedorf was on the other team, but at least that summer, his ban was overturned after 2 long years, meaning the two could finally join forces again for what the critics claimed was the strongest Dutch squad since the 1970s. And with Davids eager to rub it in everyone's faces that they had made a mistake, he ended up being probably their best player. One match he'd be smacking last-minute winners from outside the box, the other he'd be hounding Ronaldo for 90 minutes, but still, a penalty shootout stopped them from reaching the final, and obviously, a place in the tournament's all-star team was nowhere near enough to satisfy him. But unfortunately, from there on out he'd have to get used to that feeling. Even with setback after setback, Davids kept shocking the world by getting better and better when it no longer seemed possible, and yet, he rarely reaped the rewards. Right after all of that, with both Del Piero and Zidane injured, Davids played some of the best football of his life. President Agnelli even called his performance against Lazio the most beautiful he'd seen in his life. But even though he almost carried Juve to yet another Champions League final, in the end, they fell short, and with a 7th place finish in the league, the darkest period of his career began. The next year, his vision started deteriorating again, and Davids was finally diagnosed with glaucoma. Not only is it the 2nd most common cause for irreversible blindness, but the only solution was to perform yet another, even more invasive surgery. As David said it himself, "I was truly scared. I really thought I'd have to retire." But things went better than anyone could have expected, and instead, well, the only change was that he'd have to wear protective goggles for the rest of his career. And as much as they fogged up, as much as they restricted his peripheral vision, as much as his teammates mocked him for it, Davids made it legendary. In the end, the glasses were not a problem, they only made him cooler. The real problems were still in the horizon. The next season, Lippi was sacked, they lost around the league and they were quickly knocked out of the UEFA Cup. Over summer, in the Euros, he once again got sent home after a semi-final penalty shootout, made even worse by the fact that somehow his team managed to miss 2 other penalties in regulation time, and the next year, Zidane left. Even then, David seemed to be focused on once again making sure the fans barely noticed that he was gone. But as much as he succeeded, bringing back the league title after 4 years, even leading to rumors of a possible exit to Man United or Arsenal, just as the season reached its final weeks, the news came out. Davids had tested positive for doping. And I know what you're thinking, ironic, considering what I just said about Juventus a few minutes ago, but really, there was another side to it. Davids really did seem shocked when the result came out positive. As he said, "I've never even considered doping. I have very strong principles about what I put in my body. It's the only one I have, the home of my spirit. Therefore, I cherish my body. I follow these rules so strictly, it's often hard for the medical staff to work with me. I don't drink, I don't eat chocolate, I don't even take the flu vaccine." So, was he lying? Well, according to the doctor that examined Juve's medical files once the whole scandal blew up, it was very common for the medical staff to treat players for minor stuff like anemia or to give the players IV drips with vitamins, only for their blood work to once again go off the charts right after these treatments. Antonio Conte himself described this and admitted that he was always suspicious of what might have been happening there. So, you take your conclusions. Thankfully, the 16-month ban Davids had been threatened with ended up being dialed down to only 4 months, but honestly, his biggest worry was that he'd miss out on the World Cup, and though that didn't happen, he did miss the qualifiers regardless, and without him, they didn't even make it to the World Cup, so I guess it didn't matter. With Davids turning 30, most fans assume that after this mess he'd finally start to slow down, but it's Edgar Davids, so instead, he played maybe the greatest season of his career, and by the end of the year, he was in the Champions League final again. And though about 1 hour into the match with the result stuck at a goalless draw, Davids was being lauded as one of the best in the pitch. Then, he injured himself and had to be subbed off. As much as the BBC would claim his performance was inspirational, hungry and far more influential than Seedorf's, once again, after another unsuccessful penalty shootout, he'd have to watch his old friend lift the trophy, becoming the first player to win it with 3 different clubs. It's hard not to see Davids as a victim of the butterfly effect. One minor change, and Seedorf's legacy could have been his. Regardless, he was nowhere near done, because after this, he went and changed Barcelona's history forever. You see, Juve were starting a rebuild, and so midway through the season they agreed to loan him out to Barca, who had been struggling for a while, going 5 years without a trophy. They had just bought Ronaldinho, thinking he would be the solution to their problems, but now they were stuck in 11th place with 5 wins and 15 matches. As per usual, it seemed there was no saving that season, and that Rijkaard was now their coach, seemed bound to get the sack, until Davids arrived. Then they went 15 league matches without losing, and though by the end they choked the title by losing to Celta and Zaragoza in the final 3 matches of the season, Davids saved Rijkaard's job and slingshotted Barcelona towards a decade of European dominance. I just wish he had stayed there permanently, because Davids deserved that UCL trophy, but instead, well, this is where the madness begins. I could definitely make a whole video about just the late stages of his career, but it went pretty much like this. Davids moved to Inter, and shortly after, as the rumors go, in some kind of ceremony or gala, he started hitting on a woman he met, only for her husband to show up and lose his mind, which was a problem considering that the husband was Tronchetti Provera, the CEO of Pirelli, Inter's #1 sponsor, meaning that after a few months going back and forth between watching their matches either from the stands or from the bench, he left for Tottenham. Once there, the fans loved him and his impact was tremendous. On his only full season, he sent them to their second UEFA Cup in 22 years. In fact, he left them 2 points of making it to the Champions League, which they had never managed, but no matter what, his most memorable story in North London ended up being the fact that on one of his first training sessions, he pissed off Robbie Keane, not knowing he had grown up in the boxing world, and right there, he knocked them out with one punch. Then, at Ajax, he settled for losing the league title on goal difference and breaking his leg again, before retiring for 2 years and coming back to football at 38 to fulfill his dream of playing in the Premier League by joining Crystal Palace on a pay-as-you-play deal that lasted for 7 matches. But hey, if you think it was weird for a legend like Davids to join Crystal Palace, then let me tell you that 2 years later, at 40, he came back again to join Barnet in the English 4th tier, not only as a player-coach, but in this weird co-manager scenario where he shared the reins with Mark Robson. And though it worked, immediately leading Barnet to a win after 12 matches without one, they ended up finishing the season with 51 points and getting relegated regardless. It was the highest points tally of any relegated team in the competition's history. And yet, even as they went down to amateur football, even though Mark Robson himself left the club, Davids stayed as the sole manager and instantly proceeded to name himself captain, as well as issuing himself the number 1 jersey, only to get booked 9 times in his first 9 matches, finally giving up and retiring after taking 2 red cards in 2 consecutive games, comically blaming the referees for making him fall out of love with football.